It's not just law enforcement. It's not just uniformed officers. It's also special constables. And where that becomes
some people to take some of the pressure off police officers by doing duties that allow police officers then to focus on, I'll call it real police work, as it were.
Exactly. So most of the calls that we get, when we get close to 2 million calls, most of the calls that we get are non-emergency calls. I keep trying to tell the public this. Non-emergency calls, I have highly trained officers doing more of what they should not be doing. And so a classic example, when I've got people, and I spoke on this the last time, I've got 2 officers looking at hydro lines that are down from 5 o'clock in the evening till 11:30. That's not what the public wants from us. And I know if I hire more in this environment, we'll be doing more of that stuff. Or a fire, a pot fire. Why do I have 3 cars of 2 officers guarding intersections, 6 officers doing that? It doesn't make sense. Special constables will be able to look after those custodial types of occurrences, freeing up my highly trained officers to do what needs to be done. And at the same token, we're looking at ways to carve into that red meat of the most calls that we do, which are non-emergency, and deflect them, give them to somebody else, find another delivery mechanism, or just not do it anymore.
Well, I'll give an example of that. We have to wrap up because it's time for the news. But Police Chief Saunders, noise calls are going to be taken over by the city, by 311, by bylaw people, so the police don't have to go to noise calls. And we get a lot of those at 2 o'clock in the morning for people having parties. They're having a good time, but maybe a bit too good. Police Chief Mark Saunders, busy job, stressful job, I understand that, and I know how hard you're working to try and come to grips with these issues, with your command and with all your men and women, and I thank you for that. And we'll just have to go forward and do the best that we can and do better, which I know is what you want to do, and so do I. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Chief Saunders with us this morning. Coming up, the round table, and we've got Christy Blatchford, and we've got Mark Toohey, we've got Mark Warner, and we've got Tony Chapman all joining us to discuss these issues. But right now, it's time for the news at 7:30.
It's Mayor in the Morning. Here's special guest host, Toronto Mayor John Tory on In-Depth Radio. News Talk 1010.
Good morning and welcome to your Tuesday morning. 21 degrees in the city of Toronto. Sports brought to you by Tom's Place. Tom's Place will suit you. Let them show you how. Well, I don't know where Tom is this morning, but I can tell you, I see him. He starts early. He's as nutty as I am. I see him in the coffee shop at 6 o'clock in the morning getting our coffee, and he's on his way to work, but maybe he's taking a well-deserved day off. The roundtable is coming up in just a few minutes, and of course the roundtables are brought to you by the Simple Investor, making the world of real estate investment simple. One story that's in the news this morning, I think it comes from a story in the Toronto Star, just talking about how there was a process that was interrupted by the election, where what they had done. You might remember I was asked when I was a private citizen to write a report about the future of Ontario Place, and we had suggested that there should be a whole mix of uses down there with a big focus on arts and music. And the government then went through a process over a couple of years where they redeveloped a fantastic park at the east end of Ontario Place. And if you haven't been to see it, it's named after our former premier and my political mentor, Bill Davis. And it's a beautiful park. But then they had to decide what to do with the rest of it, where the Cinesphere is and all those pods and whatnot. And so they had a process, and 3 people bid. It was an open kind of bidding contest. And one of them was a German company that had been to see me about establishing something that I think would be incredibly popular in Toronto, whether it's at Ontario Place or not, and that is a big kind of indoor beach water park thing that's 12 months of the year. So you could go in mid-February and have this fantastic tropical trees and beaches and wave pools and so on, and it's done in a very, very tasteful way. So that was one. Another one was from Larry Tannenbaum, he of the Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment, that had, I think, an educational purpose, and there was a third one. And they were just about to make a decision on that, the previous government, when the election came, and they didn't quite get it done. So that comes into the hands of the new government. I'll tell you what the problem is, plain and simple with it, and I get the problem. The governments, and I suspect the new government won't be much different, have said, well, we want Ontario Place redeveloped. We want something exciting. I hope they stick to what I recommended, and I recommended together with a committee, and we went and consulted a lot of people, that it's something that has a real arts and music kind of focus to it and is not kind of kitschy like the last days of Ontario Place with all the funny half-baked rides and stuff. We got Canada's Wonderland for that if you want to go there. In any event, the government said this all had to be done no matter what it was without any government money. And you also, they say, though, you can't put anything on the site or as part of this redevelopment that makes any money. So, for example, you can't build any condo or office buildings there that might produce some revenue to do the rest of it for the music and the arts. So it puts a lot of these bidders in a bit of a conundrum where they're saying, well, we'd really like to do all the stuff you want on the arts and whatnot, but, we can't figure out how to make enough money to pay, to renovate the place and make it, something for the 21st century. But if you think about the strategic, beauty and importance of that site down on the water and what Ontario Place was when it opened in 1971, conceived of by the aforementioned Bill Davis and some of his predecessors, it has to be something of that class. It has to be done well, and it's going to cost money. So the question is going to be, should it come from tax dollars, which most people, probably including me, would say not really, or is it going to come from some kind of private investment? But of course, private investors have to make some kind of return on it, otherwise they're not going to put their money up. So that's the conundrum they're in. Welcome to government, to the new government, because they now have to deal with this and see how they make out. But the long and the short of it is, it can't sit there kind of rusting out for the next number of years while it's effectively closed. The roundtable coming up, together with traffic and weather at 7:45 here on Moore in the Morning. John Tory sitting in for John Moore. It is 21 degrees at 7:41. It's coming up on 7:47, and you know what they say, we can't complain about this weather, because people might have been complaining over the weekend, and I must say, when I was out and about on Canada Day, it was really hot and really humid. But today it's going to be sunny with a high of 31, humidex at 34, a little cooler by the lake, as you might expect. Tonight, clear and a low of 22. Tomorrow, mainly sunny, high 33, humidex 36, so not too bad. But Thursday, I have to inform you, super humid, it says right here, coming from Kelsey McEwen over at CTV, high 34, humidex mid to high 40s with showers and thunderstorms at risk. Wet again a bit on Friday, and then the weekend looks spectacular as of this moment. It's Tuesday, which is good news. Saturday, sunny, high 26, Sunday, high 29, and right now it is 21 degrees here at News Talk 1010.
The Roundtable, brought to you by the Simple Investor, making the world of real estate investment simple. The Free-for-All Roundtable, Round 1.
Well, we're welcoming today, and we're glad to have with us Mark Toohey, host of the best show ever on News Talk 1010. Mark Warner, an international trade lawyer. Tony Chapman of Tony Chapman Reactions, who's sitting in for Jerry Agar all this week. And last but certainly not least, Christy Blatchford from the National Post. Good morning to you all.
Morning.
So I guess we should start with the issue du jour, and it is, it is sad that we had another weekend of, unusually high levels of violence in the city over the weekend. And I'll say this morning, as you look at the text board, which is a bit of a measurement of what people have to say about this, because there have been hundreds of texts coming in, the themes are bring back carding, fix the justice system, more programs for neighborhoods. I mean, I would say those are the three most frequently mentioned things, with probably fix the justice system being the most frequently mentioned. So over to you, Christy, starting with you. Is there any one answer, or is there something that definitely we, and I have to include myself, the police chief and assorted others, should be doing?
It's the same old story, Mr. Mayor. You know that. First of all, people should remember that these shootings tend to be cyclical because they're so often gang-related. So they have feuds and grudges, and they go around shooting. It also has a lot to do with long, hot summers. People are indoors. It turns out that's a good thing for 8 months of the year in this country, and so they should stay. Obviously, it's upsetting and alarming when it happens that we have a rash of shootings, but aside from the third option you mentioned from the text board, which is, more programs for communities, with which I agree, and more, perhaps some specific anti-gang education and help for kids in tough neighborhoods who don't want to get into the gang life but really have very little choice. I don't think there's a particular problem with the justice system. I don't think there's a particular single easy fix.
All right. Mark Warner, you heard that roster. It's not a limiting roster from your perspective here this morning. I mean, what, if there's one thing you could put your finger on that somebody should be doing, who is it and what is it?
Yeah. So I don't, obviously practice this part of criminal law all that much, but I do, wearing two hats, my Canadian lawyer hat and my American lawyer hat. Wearing my American lawyer hat, Canadian bail laws look weird to me. You read these stories when people are caught and they seem to be out on bail, and I just wonder about that, just how lax we are. Part of that's to do with the Charter and how the Charter has come to be interpreted over the years. So I wonder whether we're doing everything, and that may not just be a general problem. It may be a Toronto problem. It does occur to me, again, just from my sort of anecdotal knowledge of this stuff, that bail seems to be applied differently if you're arrested in London, Ontario. or in, Eastern Ontario or that sort of thing. And sometimes people who are arrested in those places want to somehow get transferred into the Toronto system, which brings you to another question, which is that something to do with the judges. And so, having helped a few of my friends with their judicial interviews, I looked at the form and it seems like, it looks like a social work form to me, not really like a judging form to me.
Well, I'd love to see that form.
So would a lot of us.
So basically, I wonder whether we have the right people making the right decisions, and whether we're doing everything we should be doing on bail. Obviously, there's other stuff too in terms of getting into these communities. I don't know whether social programs work for that sort of stuff, but I think that obviously Canada generally needs more role models, I think, that people can point to, and maybe we're not doing enough on that.
Mark Toohey, I took the position at City Council, and I was just seeking authority to write a letter, but I wanted to have the backing of Council, just saying, look, if you are arrested on a gun charge today, and you're already out on bail, or if you have a previous conviction on a gun charge, the guidelines, and that's all they are, that are given to Crown Attorneys should be to say, oppose with every ounce of strength you have this person getting out on bail, because they shouldn't be back on the streets, likely ending up shooting somebody.
I think we have to be tougher on the people that have been arrested and charged, especially those that have been convicted. But you've been talking in recent days, and I commend you for that, by putting your thumb on the head of the nail, which is, this is a gang problem. We have criminal gangs, and you probably have seen the same poster, and I tell this story a lot. Back in 2012, I think, or 2013, the Danzig Street shootings, meeting with the mayor and the prime minister inside a Toronto Police Division, building out in Scarborough. And up on the walls while the premier or the prime minister and the mayor were meeting was a poster, and on the poster were hundreds of photographs of young men. And I asked one of the police officers, what is this? And he said, well, that is a rogues gallery of all the gang members that operate in this half of the city. And they know who they are. It's against the law to belong to a criminal organization. And the police did a great job the other day sort of rounding up one gang. None of them, to my knowledge, perhaps you know differently, have been charged with belonging to a criminal organization. I know it's a tough case to make, but one of the things that I would suggest is probably on your agenda to talk with the Premier when you sit down with him is the province can help out by putting more money into courts. We need more judges. We need more courts. We need more prosecutors. If I was Doug Ford, I'd set up an entirely separate system of courts.
A gang and gun
court.
court.
Gangs, so you can move them through. Because part of the problem with bail is you can't have somebody who's not convicted sitting in jail for 2 years.
Which they do. And of course that process, I'm prepared to admit, although for a repeat offender I'm less sympathetic, but that's probably a school for further criminal activity if you sit there for 2 years being taught by the people who are in there how to commit future crimes. Tony Chapman, last word, and then we should move on. This is very, very important, obviously.
It's easy to play armchair quarterback. First of all, show me the money. Why are these gangs operating? Are they getting bigger? What dollars are they generating and where? So, because there's a commerce to being in a gang. Second thing I do is to say, and again, this is armchair quarterback, and we have an anti-terrorist special force in Ottawa. Why aren't we not bringing them in to do a better job investigating the infrastructure, that honeycomb of gang activities, and say, where can we attack? Where are they vulnerable, to start beating them back? Because I believe they're growing in force in the city because there's that much money being generated with a lot of new crime, cryptocurrencies, and a lot of new drugs that are very difficult to
it's an interesting point, because, I mean, they are, as you say, sort of businesses. I mean, you don't want to normalize them as saying that, but they're commercial enterprises.
Cannabis business.
And a lot of it is drugs and guns.
Bigger than Starbucks and McDonald's is a cannabis business in North America. So let's not think of these guys as just hanging around in hoodies around a corner. This is big business, all tax-free, generating cash, and they're protecting their turf, and we've got to break apart the gangs. It's a business.
All right, let's move to something slightly lighter and more optimistic, and that is the betting odds coming out yet again this morning, and this may be the 50th consecutive year, or 51st, showing that the Toronto Maple Leafs are the odds-on favorite as of this morning, thanks to the signing of John Tavares for the Stanley Cup. But it is a step forward. I mean, if you look at what they're having to do to build up a real contender, I think, Mark Toohey, this is a positive step.
Oh, and speaking as an expert on the icicle arts, of hockey. I think what do I know? It's got to be good news. Everybody's talking about it. The one thing I'll say, though, is I thought last year at the end of the season, everybody was pointing out that our weakness as a team here in Toronto was defense. And to the best of my knowledge, Tavares is a centerman.
Mark, I want to build on that because I think that it's very rare you get a Macklin or a Crosby or a Gretzky and a Messier playing together. Is Austin Matthews, who already was demanding more ice time, going to let the new alpha come in and be the top center? So I don't think it's. My conspiracy theory is we might see a big trade coming up for a big D. So that's my thought.
I'll save the only real expert on this roundtable for the last, and that's Christy. But Mark Warner, do you think this is going to be a plus for the Leafs and for the fans and for the man who's coming into the hottest cauldron of hockey discussion and debate in the whole league?
Well, I hope so. I mean, I was always originally a Montreal Canadiens fan, so I'm sort of gradually becoming a Leafs fan, like half of us. But how
long has that taken exactly? Come on, get in the game here, buddy.
Last 9 months, maybe.
But he's honest.
But I do think, there's something about anything, whether you're hiring anything, I think you hire for quality. You hire the best.